The story of Sointula on Malcolm Island in British Columbia begins in December of 1901 when a group of Finnish immigrant coal miners from Nanaimo, BC were determined to create a self-sustaining, cooperative society that would be fair to all its workers. Sointula is a Finnish word that translates to meaning a place of harmony.
Unlike most utopian societies, this one begins on a business-like basis with settlers buying shares in the Kalavan Kansa Colonization Company, which is roughly translated as the Finnish People's Colonization Company. Settlers were the owners, and when they go to the island, they became the workforce as well. The Kalavan Kansa paid everyone, men and women, $1 a day for their work. To guide the work and the settlement, two Finnish men, Matti Kuurikka and A.B. Makkala, were invited to lead the colony. The charismatic idealist Matti Kuurikka led the creation of this unique society. Makkala was the businessman. The number of settlers grew quickly, outstripping the accommodation space. An incredible amount of work was done, decisions made, and most importantly, everything was discussed communally. Right from the beginning, there were plays, choirs, bands, and study groups, and a strong emphasis on education. Socialist thought was central. Life was both hard and exciting. On the evening of January of 1903, just 13 months after the commune began, tragedy struck. The group was gathered together on the third floor of the newly built 3-story communal building when a devastating fire started. At the end of the night, 11 people were dead, 8 children, 2 women, and 1 man. The trauma of the event was heartbreaking, turning point for this settlement. By 1904, Matti Kuurikka and about half the settlers left Malcolm Island. The Kalavan Kansa declared bankruptcy and it disbanded in 1905. But Sointula persevered. Finns and others kept coming, sometimes individually and sometimes in waves, such as after World War II and the American draft dodgers in the 1970s and 80s. The chance to live a life of hard work and a close, caring community was, and still is to this day, irresistible. Today, tourism and a good place to retire have been added to this list. Fishing and logging formed the financial backbone of the island for much of Sointula's history. Today's island population is made up of many proud descendants of those early Finnish settlers, as well as those who have followed. We are a community drawn to the magic of Sointula, a place of harmony.
So Kathy, the Sointula Museum has embarked on this wonderful, multifaceted archival project. Can you tell us a bit about that? Sointula has an unusual history. It was started in 1901 by Finnish immigrants as an intentional collective society. They wanted it to be a model for a more equitable form of life throughout the world, partially. So it's a story that deserves to be told. You must have also, as the museum director and being involved in all the different, facets of this project, that when you started to discover what was here in terms of photos and books and everything, how is that and how did that develop? We just are completing a 6-month archival project. And during that, we found boxes of unidentified historical community photos. So the need for a photo identification project was very evident. We got some funding. We went through all of the photos and pulled out the oldest ones. Recruited a group of our community elders to come in and attend 6 coffee party style sessions where they look through the photos. They're looking at who is in it, where is it, what's going on, And then that engenders amazingly intimate but funny stories. I mean, they're fun. So we take all of that information and we have scribes with each of the groups, and they record the information, the stories, so that we can then put it into a searchable database. Sointula has never had a municipal government of any kind, not a mayor or council or any of those things. How do you think that has affected the history and how people lived in this community?
Well, they had their meetings, regular meetings, and the whole, everybody was there where they discussed what they're going to do and any problems that came up. That's why they lasted so long.
Nobody really told them what to do. They all told each other what they wanted to do.
And then argued about it for a little hours.
Yeah, for days.
Well, originally, it was the co-op store that ran everything in Sointula. It was the government, basically. They did everything from the roads to they did everything. And after that, they decided not to do it with the co-op anymore. They had something called the Board of Trade here, which ran the government in Sointula, basically. And the Board of Trade basically had a number of people on the thing, and they decided what was going to happen in Sointula through public meetings or through other ways. And after that, we ended up with the regional district of Mount Waddington, and they now can govern us now.
Somebody said something once about a police appointers, and Sointula have a police force or something, and my mother was telling that the answer to that question was the Finnish people police themselves.
Look at the town. I mean, where else do you find a place that everything's run by volunteers? Just incredible here. Everything from the co-op board to the water board to the museum, every organization, graveyard committee, everything is basically run by volunteers still. Any organization that they saw that was having trouble, like the strikers in Winnipeg or anything, they raised money for an incredible amount of socialist causes in Canada. Absolutely amazing. Here in Sointula, they'd raise, like in the 1920s, they'd raise like $134 for like some organization somewhere back east that was having problems. So it was just incredible.
Sointula is also interesting because it has a cemetery committee, a waterworks. Say a little bit about that, because that's very different than other places.
Cemetery committee is, okay. Tula's sort of in charge of the cemetery committee, but we don't meet too often. Anybody that has lived in Sointula or their husband or wife can be buried in Sointula for free. Most people leave a nice big donation, and that pays for the upkeep of the cemetery.
Storm, that was the entertainment committee. They called it, the translation is the Storm. It was the entertainment committee in town, and they organized all the entertainment, like in the halls and all the events, and that was their goal. And they had a minute book downstairs we looked at. So they actually kept minutes. They have a financial record.
So very organized.
And there's the Farmers Institute here, like on the island, and that was another organization that had finances and a book.
Would they just help farmers?
They supported the farmers. Yeah. And out of that, they bought stuff in bulk for the farmers. So instead of a farmer going out and buying one feed for his cows, they would buy everybody feed with this organization, right? Or they would buy everybody seeds with this organization, like a cooperative. Let's call it an early cooperative.
Yeah.
Because that's what basically most of these organizations were. They were early cooperative.
It's a collective.
Yeah, collective.
Explain the Fin Fund. I think that's interesting. It's
Friends in need now.
and what's it they do?
Well, if you're going down island for medical purposes, like people going for chemo, or then they will give you money to help for your gas, your hotel room, your meals, whatever you need.
But I discovered just this year, Kathy, when they were doing the project this last year, found the minutes for a Communist Party meeting here in the 1920s. And my grandmother was the secretary. But she never spoke of politics. But my aunt and uncle actually didn't speak to me about it, but they have the the magazines there, and I always knew that they were communist.
Left-leaning.
Yeah. Well, actually, more than left-leaning, they were, yeah, communist. And this is after the Soviets had tried to invade Finland in the 40s. They were still Communist Party members. I think that was probably the breaking point for many of the communist Finns here, that when Stalin tried to conquer Finland in the 40s, that they left the party.
There is a little story behind Lady Liberty. Originally, when it was in the museum, nobody knew who painted it. They thought maybe Carlo Geisler painted it. But I came in here with Stoivo's son one day, many, many years ago, and he looked at the painting and he goes, "Oh, that's my father's painting." So that's when we knew who painted this painting behind me. It was Stoivo Otto that painted it. So what it was basically Lady Liberty, who we borrowed from another painting, I'm sure, leading the workers to freedom from industrial city, which is on the left of the painting. And the industrial city at that time would have probably been Tampere in Finland, because it was a huge industrial city and he lived close by that city, and a number of his siblings were born in that city, actually.
So you mentioned that when your family arrived the first time in Sointula, that there was a group of people at the dock to meet you. So what was it like coming here, and how did the community react?
Well, they were very welcoming and helpful, as because like I told you, we flew, so we didn't bring lots of stuff with us, and they just helped, collected everything and house that their mom and dad were renting, and no, it was just amazing how the town just moved and helped and in every way. And then there were kids here that spoke Finn, and a couple of girls came first, but then there were more boys that spoke Finn. So we were starting to relax and enjoy that town. At first it was very hard. We missed our own home, but the thing was that even in Finland we were always a family unit, did everything. So when we came here, the family was still together. Yeah. No, it was different. It was a lot smaller place, Sointula, but it was nice and welcoming and friendly. Yeah.
I know my mom didn't know English till she started school. Then my grandmother was Scottish, but the house they lived in, my mother's grandparents and her dad were all Finns, and they spoke Finnish all the time. And my poor grandmother, she didn't speak a word of Finnish. I'm sure she was lonely at times.
Mm-hmm. And the little old ladies especially, not so much the men, because they went out in the world and worked. But the little old ladies, they never got to learn English, because everywhere they went here and anything they needed, they could do in Finn. So the older ladies, I guess that's where we got our accents from.
I looked after Loretta's mother years later during a home care. And of course, Loretta's not always said she couldn't speak English. She could speak English and she really wanted to. She told me when she came from Finland what she did for a living. Her sister was already here. What floor she worked on, all in English. But as soon as Loretta came home, it was back to Finn, right?
Right. Well, when I was growing up, she would talk to me in Finn, and I would answer her in English, and we got along fine.
Looking at my mother's diary, and she was 14 and she was coming home at 4 o'clock in the morning from dances. Air Force Band was a regular band that used to come here from the Air Force in Port Hardy, the base in Port Hardy, and play. Yeah, it was a regular band. And the girls from here used to go up there. They used to send a boat down here to pick the girls up from Sointula, and you talk about late nights. They used to go there, dance, and then the boat would come back, and they'd get here like the next day, like 6 in the morning, when the boat would bring them back. All the girls loved it. Yeah, they loved it. They never danced so hard in their life, she said. It was great. I think there might have been a couple of romances that came out of that one too, but I can't remember them off the top of my head.
It looked like, you know, going from after the war, 53, things were pretty bare in Finland, so coming here, it really looked like the promised land. As things were, you know, built up and congregated together and more prosperous. So, like most of the Finns that came over, it was to earn enough money, and some of them went back, like my family.
I was born in Lurk Bay, and I came to Sointula right from the hospital, and I grew into Sointula, and going away from here to another town was just really too big. Everything else was too big. Sointula was just the right size, right? I don't know about you, but.
No, I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't know any better, actually, because we were here. I mean, I didn't know there was anything else. We didn't have really no internet, no TV, so we basically were quite isolated here, actually, except for the Union Steamship every week.
Yeah.
And then later on, the ferry showed up. That's when we were no longer isolated, and I went, whoa, no, we're not the only people on the planet.
I was born in little village, and I have seen pictures here before. I know what.
So it wasn't a surprise for
No.
you. Have you ever felt that Sointula was too isolated or too small?
I did when I was a teenager. Right, Loretta?
Right.
We tried to get out of here.
What do you mean you tried to get out of here? What did you do? Oh, you're not telling it?
We got on the Catalan
Okay.
and went in the ladies' washroom and stood on the toilets. And the boat left Sointula, headed for Port McNeill and then Lurk Bay and then to Vancouver. So we decided once we're on our way, then we'll sleep in the life rafts. Well, we didn't get too far. They would not dock in Port McNeill till we came out of the washroom. They came into the washroom. Okay, girls, get out.
But although it was a culture shock, when we did move to the city and I started university, that was absolutely mind-blowing, even though we had visited Vancouver every summer, because my mother's parents were in Vancouver and she grew up in Vancouver.
So what was, when you're saying it was a culture shock, what were the things that you had to kind of adapt to that were unusual for you?
Like 300 students in a classroom in a lecture hall.
Yeah.
I mean, a huge campus, not knowing anyone. Because of course here you knew everyone. But I used to feel that in the summers going to visit my grandparents. You know, I'd trip over cracks in the sidewalk. We didn't have sidewalks. It was, you know, going up escalators and, you know, just worried that you were going to be sucked under. But it was, and that we did that every summer, and yet I don't think I ever really got used to it. It's probably why I'm back here. I mean, I spent over 40 years away, but I came back.
We spent a lot of time on the beach. We were building rafts, and we didn't have any hammers. We used rocks for a hammer, and our nails were on a rusty board, or the rusted nails from old boards that were on the beach. Then we'd float them all over the place. And we were by the ferry dock, so it's quite steep all of a sudden. Boy, we got our backsides tanned a couple of times. We're going out around the wharfs with them.
Well, we were always, long before the breakwater ever came, we used to load all the rowboats full of rocks and pretend we had a full load of fish. We didn't have hardly any freeboard there. So then my brother, he was a couple of years older than me, we dared him to go full speed backwards with this full load of rocks. Of course, down he went, had to swim ashore. Of course, at low tide, we just went there and took all the rocks out and everything was all good.
That's how the kids entertain themselves.
Yeah.
And of course, that's Edna Long.
So who was Edna Mom? Because the party's for her, right?
She was she's retiring from bringing children into this world.
She was midwife.
Midwife.
She was midwife. She brought my mother into the world.
How many babies did she?
Well, I don't know. We don't know.
Everybody.
But it was out at what used to be Middleton's farm. I don't know who owns it now. Out there in Galleva, right? That's where they lived.
Did they have a special room for
Yeah,
them?
they had a shack there that she used to birth.
Sauna type.
Sauna.
Sauna times, they always had nice hot water for the birthings. But my mother said that when Edna Long was waiting for the baby to come, she would fall asleep. And she would take her rest, and Mom said she just slid off her chair onto the floor, had a little nap before the baby finally arrived.
Could be 2 days.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Were there other traditions around Christmas? Like, May Day was a really big day, but were there community events around Christmas too? I guess that would have been.
At Christmas, well, they had a big thing at the hall on Christmas Eve. Santa came, everybody came to the hall. You didn't have Christmas Eve at home, you had it at the hall. Right. They had programs and coffee. When the adults were having coffee, Santa came. Us kids stayed upstairs, and Santa came then. And then there was always a dance, of course, after.
The Christmas dance. So did Santa give a little present?
Oh, for sure.
What kind of things?
Little toys, but nice toys. I think the co-op sponsored all that.
I remembered what they actually did. The co-op gave a present to every kid in town at Christmas time. And we would meet up at the hall, and it would be all decorated, and we would hear Santa's little bells, the jingle bells coming, and he'd be coming. And I remember sitting in the front row, all the kids in town were there, sitting in the front row and getting their present. And then the next year you'd sort of move back as you got older, and you'd move back, and then all of a sudden you'd hear somebody say, "Oh, is Santa only Anderson this year?" And that's when we started to realize that the older men in town were actually Santa Claus. And they were handing out the presents, and then they go home and say, "Isn't Santa Claus a real type of thing?" And then we got told that, yes, it's just one of the men in town, the Santa Claus. But he gave presents to all the kids from the store.
And the Christmas liquor order used to come with ship too, so that was something else. Yeah, there's a pre-Christmas liquor order you could do probably in November. You could send it in the beginning of November. Everybody order all this liquor for Christmas. Well, actually, it was for the whole year. But unfortunately, they'd have all drank by February, so then they'd have to make their own. May Day was a very important communal celebration right up until probably the 1970s. Every year it was celebrated massively here. Yeah, and that with the parade and then a probably communal dinner at the hall, and it was like a massive celebration.
What was the parade like? I don't think I heard about it.
Yeah, there was usually a parade of people with flags and all kinds of stuff probably. I can't remember. In my day it was cars, because everybody had cars, by decorated cars, but and decorated things like that. And there was even brownies and scouts in some of them, if I remember right.
Would there be musicians or?
Yeah, there would be musicians too, yeah. Yeah.
The speaker's platform. One of the photos has you as a very young girl standing in front of it. And I'm really interested in what the speaker's platform was and what it was used for. Where was it?
They would give their political speeches from there. And I'm assuming they would say the agenda for the meeting was, for the picnic, what we could expect. There was races for the children. The men would pitch horseshoes. There was always a tug of war, which was neat. There was old people in there, and there were little kids hanging onto this rope, and it was fun.
So why I like this picture is because there's the four ladies having tea, and the Finns always had a tablecloth on the table, doesn't matter where they were. And this picture is basically taken in the middle of a wilderness, and they have a tablecloth on the table with fancy cups and fancy food and everything, and they're in the middle of a wilderness, and they're sitting there having their coffee. So a tablecloth was mandatory.
Ironed.
Ironed, that's right, I forgot. It had to be ironed. If it had creases, it was you were in trouble. I know that, yeah, that's right.
When I was a kid, I had to take part in some of the plays at the hall that were put on by the, I don't know what, some of them, I don't know who was all in them. I know my grandfather wrote a play, and I was the cabin boy in that play. And
Was it in Finn? Yes.
oh, it was in English, yeah. And so I got all the paperwork for that thing.
Was that the Windjammer?
Windjammer, yeah.
Plays, the plays, I don't know how they did all those plays, because they did a play a month apparently. Really? Yeah, and that's a enormous amount of work, considering the makeup you have to do, the staging, everything you got to do for a play, and they managed to do one a month. Wow, on top of everything else. Yeah. And it was a limited population. They had all these committees and organizations, plus they were doing plays. Like like Cisco said all the time, where did they get the time to do all this? Right. Where did they get the time? But they managed to do it all. It was just amazing.
There were no organized churches here.
No.
Until about the 1950s.
Yeah, well, it was basically because of the immigration. And also, there was the Finns here at that time were, like you say, socialists and some communists. So for some reason, the missionaries thought this was one of their main targets that they wanted to target. And they tried to target Sointula many times by sending missionary boats here. And in the end, they finally got a missionary here. And he lived here for many years. And the idea was that we have to convert these non-religious Finns into, but it didn't work in a lot of cases, of course. But so we actually had a person sent here as a missionary. He told me that story himself, that he was sent here from Campbell River up that area to live here and try and get some of the Finns to join the church and whatever. So, the types of books that surprised us, really surprised us. The ones that surprised us most was the ones on women's biology in early 1900. I mean, those books would have been banned in Canada, and they had them in their library. And book on birth control in early 1900s in the library here, that would have been banned for sure. Right. Actually, they did get a list. We didn't find a list of banned books, but we found a letter where they told them that they had to ban certain books here in the library. We found the letter, but we didn't find a list of books they had to ban. Oh. But being Finns, we suspect those books just made it farther into the dark corner in the hall, because we found them all when we went through the Finnish books.
So, my understanding is that the gillnet drum was invented here in Sointula.
There was a fellow called Laurie Jarvis he didn't invent the drum. It had been invented years ago, and he didn't invent the drive, but he figured out how to put a drive and a drum together to pull an end out.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Sturgeon 1?
Well, the Sturgeon 1 was built by Toivo Arrow, who was Vern Arrow's grandfather, and the way I've heard it anyway, he just built the hull, and then the hull was launched, and he moved into Tarkkanen's small little boathouse. Albert Tarkkanen's father and Albert and his father Jack, they finished it and made it ready to go fishing. And in 1954, Albert bought a different boat, and my father-in-law bought the sturgeon one. And he had it for many years, and I got to work on the engine off and on, and put a new engine in there to boot. And then when he retired, he sold it to Mark Blidd. And Mark Blidd sold it, fished it for years, and then when he got a new aluminum boat, it became Nancy and Dave Lanquist's boat, the sturgeon one, and I believe it's Nancy that wound up donating it to the museum via Souness or something, I've heard, yeah. Then I worked on it for a couple of years and made it look a little bit more like it should have looked. Took all the modern aluminum drums and stuff off there and got help building a new drum, and I fixed the cabin windows and found an old engine that was exactly the same kind of engine that was originally in that boat, and various things like that. It was a fun job. I had lots of people coming in off and on to help me and paint, and Jack Danner was in there, and Loretta and Souness were in there scrubbing the inside.
My dad was a staunch union man, and he died very suddenly. And he had made arrangements when he passed that his ashes would go out to sea. Well, there happened to be a fisherman's strike that year, and a lot of fishermen went fishing.
And some of them stayed on shore watching these people fishing.
And the fellow that took my dad's ashes out on his boat was one that had gone fishing. And they said to my mother, "How can you let Wayne's ashes go out on that boat?" It was ugly for me. Like, well, because that was done long before there was a strike, and a lot of hard feelings, lots of literally fist fights in the barn over the union and who fished and who didn't fish. Very hard feelings.
Well, it was great fun going on Union steamships. I can even remember the smell in our cabins, because there was always a bar of wrapped Yardley lavender soap, and I used to just love it. And these, the staterooms were beautiful. They were usually, bunk beds and exposed metal, and you did have a porthole, but you did have a sink with your bar and whatever the soup. And then they would ring a bell when it was time to go to the dining room, and you would get monogrammed, cutlery and plates, linen tablecloths, linen napkins. It was really quite the adventure. I'm sure I only did it maybe 5 or 6 times in the 50s, because then we did get, the large freighters. They were more freighters than ferries, the ones that hoisted the cars on. We certainly weren't driving on.
Well, the other one's just a picture of the old school, eh? And why did I pick that? Because my mother drilled into me years ago that the school was built the year she started school. So 1923 she was born, so she would have started school in, were they 6 or 7 at the time? I don't know what year they were.
Is that this building here?
Yeah, that's this building that we're in, yeah.
Okay. 1928, I think it says on the plaque.
Yeah, well, that's when she would have started school, like that, and that's when it was built, yeah.
My story about this picture, I came from Finland in as the family in 53. I was 14 years old. And I went to grade 0, I guess it would have been. Me and my older brother standing there with the ankle biters, learning English. That was in the spring, so it only 2 months till end of June. So then, this would be grade 4.
I had so different teachers. One year I had a teacher, the year I was leaving here, and she did not get along with the principal. She locked the door and we danced all of grade 8. Actually, one of the fellows stroked his collarbone as we were trying to teach him how to dance. But we literally did no scope work. And when I got to the city, I should have repeated. I was far behind, which was really hard, leaving a town with 500 people and going to a school with 800 students was a shock. I think I cried just about every day. I wanted out of here as a teenager. When I got out of here, I wanted back.
So that's all the ladies from the eating meeting.
What is the eating meeting?
Co-op meeting.
Co-op meeting, all the kids from the school used to roar up there too for their lunch.
What was an all-day thing?
And there was like, I would say there was 85 to 90 kids going to school them days.
Yeah. And it was handy because the schools here, we just went up the hill.
My friend and me were on the beach and it wasn't word. And it was a Saturday, for heaven's sake. And we were there popping away. And the next day the principal's running out. And what are you girls doing? So of course we're trying to crawl under Williams's boat shed. Monday morning, sure enough, my friend didn't come to school. I got hauled into the office by my teacher, not the principal, and he said, I understand you were smoking on the beach. I went, yeah, I was. Well, the next time, go farther than the beach. Look, he wasn't too upset, but the principal was.
All those years that you've been here in Sointula, can you think of a couple of words that, when you think of your life here, come to mind?
I would say friendly and secure and safe. Like I've been a widow for 20 years, and what would be a safer place along than here, you know? And still the same helpful neighbors and helpful friends. It's really a blessing to live here.
You know, what I feel with this documentary and this whole project is that we're thanking and we're honoring our community's elders. They're so amazing, and our life just wouldn't be as rich without them.
Well, on behalf of the Malcolm Island Sointula community, a big thank you.